bell rang where there were no guests. The first time I heard the bell, it wasn't the front desk's bronze chime, but something thinner, like a wine glass stroked by a wet finger. It threaded through the rain and the sodium glow of the highway like a whisper begging to be found. By the time I pulled my car beneath the cracked awning of the Hotel Oleander, the bell had stopped. A neon vacancy sign, half lit and stuttered. The lobby's revolving door creaked as if someone had just passed through it, though the parking lot was empty except for my car and a long-faded shuttle van with tires flattened to shoulders of dust. I told myself the detour was a mistake, a whim on a storm-bad night. I told myself I was a journalist first and a collector of haunted stories second. But the truth is, some bells are not rung to be answered. They are rung to announce that you've already arrived. I was chasing a rumor, the kind that swims under the surface of forums and late-night threads about a hotel that keeps its guests. They say it's all-inclusive, and then some. I signed the register in my looping hand and set the pen down. When I looked back, there was a second line beneath my signature. The name matched my own. Welcome, a voice said, warm as tea left too long on a low flame. We've been expecting you. The clerk wore a suit the color of rainwater and a smile that showed careful, practiced teeth. His name tag read Night Auditor. On the counter between us was an old bell whose button had been polished down by years of use. I did not press it. I already knew how it sounded. Room 313, he said. Top of the east stair. I didn't make a reservation, I said. You did, he said with a tilt of his head. You just don't remember when. The brass key he handed me was heavy enough to anchor a small boat, part I check-in, or the inventory of lone things. They teach you early, if you write about haunted places, that you're really writing about abandoned promises, marriages, renovations, exits. The Oleander was full of them. In the lobby's glass cases, newspaper clippings were sun-bleached into anonymity. A wedding photo showed a bride whose face was a white burned square where light had overexposed the film. In a gilded cage hung a phone with a cloth-wrapped cord. When I lifted the receiver, there was a distant ocean in it, then the click of some attentive ear. Front desk, the night auditor said. I could hear his smile. I didn't dial, I told him. You are heard even when you don't ask to be, he replied, and the line went dead. At the base of the east stairs stood a luggage cart with velvet rubbing off to reveal the yellow underskin. It bore no suitcases, only a single child's shoe, a man's hat, a woman's glove. Lone things, if hotels were invented to hold strangers together for a night. Haunted hotels keep the things people forgot to keep together. stairwell smelled like old perfume and wet plaster. Rain rattled the tall windows. By the second floor, I could taste iron, the ghost of blood, or an exposed pipe. Numbers marched along the hallway carpet. 301, 303, 305, skipped 307. Then the even side, 302, 304. The corridor ran in an improbable loop, doubling back on itself like a train track melted by heat. When I finally found 313, it had no peephole. The key turned stiffly. Inside, the room had been staged for a very specific guest. The lamp bulbs were 40 watt, a small gesture toward the soft light I use when writing. The desk was turned to face the window. The minibar held a single bottle of rye I'd mentioned once in an interview about the most honest liquor. On the bureau, under the television, lay a folded brochure, a brief history of the Oleander. The title font curled like petals. I opened it to the center spread. The dates slid downhill. 1928 grand opening. 1933 fire on East Wing. 1951 reopening. 1972 temporary closure. 2001 new management. After that, blank years like a mouth full of missing teeth. In the gutter between pages, someone had penciled a line. If you're reading this, you've already checked out of somewhere else. I looked up. The room's air conditioner whispered, though it wasn't turned on. The mirror over the dresser reflected the bed and the window, and a portion of the ceiling where water stains blossomed like maps of countries I'd never visit. And in the mirror's bottom corner, I saw a tiny brass bell sitting on the nightstand that was not, in fact, there when I turned. I did not remember seeing it in the room, but I knew, without knowing how, that if I rang it, I'd be answered. Part Roman 2, the elevator that arrives from elsewhere. I told myself I wouldn't chase phantoms my first hour. I told myself to document. But I took my recorder and a notebook all the same and went in search of the elevator, because all good hotels contain a mouth. The elevator doors were brass, pitted with a rash of age. Inside, the panel listed floors from B to 9, but buttons 4 and 8 were missing, as if the hotel, superstitious, had excised its own unlucky bones. The ceiling's grill was a scrolled oval like a cochlea. When the doors closed, I felt I had entered the hotel's ear. I pressed B. The elevator thought about it a while, then ascended to 9 instead. The bell above the door chimed 10 times, though 9 was the last floor. When the doors opened, the corridor was breath-white cold and smelled faintly of damp flowers. whose lines refused to meet. I walked until the walls narrowed and the floor tilted so slightly I believed, at first, it was vertigo. Then a draft stroked my face, lifting the hair on my arms. A woman stood at the far end of the hall with her back to me, her dress the color of dead lace. Water dripped from her hem, dotting the carpet with darker ovals that did not soak in. If ghosts are the shapes grief chooses when it needs to talk, then she was a paragraph. "Hello," I called softly. The recorder in my pocket ticked on. She didn't turn. Her hand lifted, a bell between finger and thumb. She rang it once. The sound didn't travel forward. It went sideways into the walls. Behind me, the elevator doors began to close. "Wait," I said aloud, and to the hotel. "Please." The doors paused like a held breath, then stilled open, obedient. My reflection in the brass looked taller, thinner, as if stretched by rain. When I turned back, the woman was gone. Where she had been was a smear of wet light, and on the floor, a room key like mine, but engraved 39. No floor had 39 rooms. I pocketed it anyway, part Roman 3, the ledger of missing guests. At the front desk, the Night Auditor was hunched over a massive ledger, his pen making a music of scratches. The bell on the counter sat between us like a small, tolerable god. "You moved in," he said without looking up. "For the night," I said, "for the record." "What is that?" I asked, nodding to the book. "Our ledger. Hotels must keep one by law. Names, dates, balances, debits, and credits, but to be truthful. And I do try to be truthful after midnight. This is less a ledger than a set of binding vows. Every signature is a length of thread. If you pull too hard, things unravel." He turned the book toward me. The columns were headed in elegant copperplate: arrive, depart, paid, owed, room. Next to my name, the entry looked like the floor 9 corridor: arrive today's date, depart blank, paid my rate, owed a long, empty line that implied a number too large for arithmetic. Room 313. In a faint pencil box handwritten above the columns, comped for story. "I didn't write that," I said. "You did," he said gently. Before what? "Before you left," he said, and closed the ledger. "We only ever check people in twice." Lightning limned the windows. Rain needled the neon. The Night Auditor blinked slowly, like a creature at rest, like someone who never slept, but had perfected the posture of someone who did. "What happened on the 9th floor?" I asked. "A water issue," he said. "A problem with the pipes that became a problem with the guests, that became a problem with the police, who became a problem with the owners, who became a problem with the city, who ultimately became a problem with memory." No one remembers anything correctly. That's the trouble with water damage. Patterns run. You reopened in 2001, I said, thinking of the brochure. He smiled without mirth. There's always new management. And the bell, I asked. He met my eyes. Rings when something arrives or when something leaves. Something, I repeated. We don't encourage specifics after midnight, he said, as if he were warning me away from an unguarded rail. Will you require wake-up service? Do you offer it? We try, he said, but waking up isn't always in our scope. Part Roman 4, the banquet that won't end. If the elevator is the hotel's mouth, the banquet hall is its stomach. Ballrooms are built to digest hope. The Oleanders was no exception. Gilt molding, chandeliers like bridal jellyfish, a stage framed by drapes the color of an old bruise. A calendar on the wall had stopped on OCT 1972. Someone had circled the 13th and written gala. Yet, when I pushed open the side door, the room was lit and set. 100 place settings gleamed like small moons. The flowers were fresh. The air smelled sweet, as if someone had broken a jar of honey. At the far end, an orchestra played quietly to no one, their bowing arms moving without instruments. The music came anyway. Sir, a waiter said. He was slight as a bookmark in tuxedo tails too large for his thin frame. We don't seat parties of one for the gala. I'm not staying, I said. I'm just looking, he finished with a little nod. That's what most say. On the table nearest me, a name card read L. Heart 2. The second card beside the first was blank. I took a place at the periphery, recorder on the table, letting it drink the room. Have you ever been to a party that never ends? I asked the waiter. I work one, he said. How long? Since the bell rang, he said. He tilted the bottle over my glass. Red draped the crystal. What bell? I asked. His smile sharpened, becoming someone else's for a second. The Night Auditor's, perhaps, or the woman's. You hear it already. I lifted the glass. It smelled like funeral flowers taste. The orchestra's melody tightened until it was a wire. Across the hall, a door opened, and a wind moved through the room. Each flame on each candle bending in the same direction. Every name card rustled like bird wings. The waiter flinched so hard the bottle shook, staining his cuff. Sorry, he said, eyes wide. They're early tonight. They, exits on your right. He looked like he wanted me to become smaller, hard to see. Who's they? I pressed. He swallowed. Check the pool, he said, and busied himself with candles that needed no tending. I left my glass untouched. In the corridor, the air was colder. The walls had been papered so many times that each new pattern only partly hid the one beneath. This is how hauntings look when you renovate. A palimpsest of choices, Part V, the pool where the water remembers. The pool was beneath the building, tiled in a mosaic of sea green that made everything drowned look like a jewel. No water moved, though the surface was crossed by ripples that came from nowhere. On the lifeguard chair sat a folded towel shaped like a swan whose beak had been torn away. On the far wall, a mural of swimmers had faded until their faces were pale half-ovals. Their eyes were unpainted. It's always eerie to see people without eyes. Some part of the brain recognizes how much of personality is simply the direction gaze points. A rack of pool hooks held bathing caps with names stitched in cursive: Mary, Dale, H. Mother. That last one made me shiver. There is nothing like finding the most private word you know hanging in a public place. At the shallow end, a wheelchair sat strapped to a dolly, its wheels wrapped in plastic, as if preparing for a long, wet journey. I stood over it and had the feeling that someone had recently stood exactly where I was, repeating this exact examination, like a coin rubbing a groove. In the quiet, I heard it, a bell far off. Not the front desk bell, a smaller voice. The sound came through the vent in the wall, the metal louver trembling. I pressed my ear to the grate. A child's laugh slid out, and then a woman's hiss, the syllables slipping at the edges like soap. Between them, the bell again, rung as a warning or an invitation, or both, depending on how long you had been here already. When I turned, the wheelchair had moved. Just a foot, no more. Wet tracks led nowhere. "Hello," I said, because the worst thing you can do in a haunted hotel is pretend you're alone. "What do you owe?" a voice asked from the starry dark of the ceiling. "I'm sorry." "What do you owe?" it repeated, like someone reading from the ledger. "For what you stayed, for what you left, for what you will take." "I haven't taken anything," I said, and in the same breath understood that this was the exact truth, and also wildly untrue. Hotels are built to make us feel like nothing belongs to us, so we can borrow everything for a night. We take and leave invisible things. The bell rang again. It sounded closer. I opened my eyes and saw, rippling across the pool's surface, my reflection ringing. My hands weren't moving. In the watery mirror, they were. I backed away until my shoulders found the wall. Somewhere, not necessarily on this floor, someone said my name. Part VI, room 313 makes a call. This is the part where a person usually flees. But there are two kinds of people who stay: fools and professionals. And if you're in my line, you are usually both. In 313, the air was warmer than it had been. The bell on the nightstand waited with patient, mineral attention. The phone was off the hook and buzzing like a trapped fly. I pressed it to my ear. front desk, the Night Auditor sang. "I didn't call," I said. "You will," he said. And in the background, something like strings being tuned, high, tentative. "Who's on 9?" I asked. "I saw someone, a woman. Rooms that high are reserved for those who cannot come down," he said. "There was a flood. The pipes broke. The water went wrong." "Wrong how?" "As in, what happens when water is asked to hold bodies too long?" he said. "Are there bodies in the walls?" I asked. It felt like a dumb question in a city full of practical ones, but it was the one that wanted asking. "Define in," he said kindly. "Define walls, define bodies." "Stop," I said. "Just tell me who's ringing the bell." He didn't answer for a breath, 2, 3, then, "It is rung by whoever is next." My gaze found the nightstand bell. My hand moved toward it and did not. "I won't," I said, and hung up. I wrote notes until the ink stopped making sense, then lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling water maps until they became, in my tired eyes, a series of dark rooms connected by narrow corridors. Somewhere in that mosaic, someone walked. Not fast, not slow. The steady pace of someone escorting another to a door. Sometime near midnight, the room phone rang. I did not let it finish the first chime. "Front desk," he said. "Yes." "Wake up call," he said. "You asked to be woken when the bell rang." I did not. "You will," he said again, patient as tide. "What do you want from me?" I asked. "An inventory," he said. "What did you bring? What did you promise? What is the cost to be told the truth about yourself?" "I didn't come here for myself," I snapped. "You never went anywhere for anyone else," he said, and put me on hold. Soft orchestral music poured into my ear. It was the same song the ghost orchestra played downstairs, except now I could hear the part where the violinists breathed. I set the receiver down and took the brass key. Its cold had warmed to me, and walked into the hall. There were voices down the corridor, muffled, like a conversation through a wall. When I moved toward them, they retreated. When I stepped back, they came closer. I tried the door opposite mine. It opened. Inside, no furniture. Just a scattering of personal items arranged as if for identification. A comb, a rosary, a pack of cigarettes with 3 missing, a typewritten note torn in half. The room smelled like the idea of lemons. On the wall, scratched deep into the plaster, was a set of tallies, tick marks grouped in 5s. I counted to 80 and then stopped. My throat hurt. On the floor, a guest card, "Welcome, Heart Party." My name again, only misremembered into something sharper. When I turned to leave, the door had closed itself. The handle would not turn. Behind me, the wall bubbled like thin bread rising. A wetness gathered along the seam between plaster and baseboard. It thickened to a line, then a seep, then a run. a seam, a child's giggle. And then, from right under the floor, the bell, part Roman 7, the dumbwaiter opens. In the east stairwell, behind a mop bucket and a cart of towels that had more stains than fabric left, I found the dumbwaiter. A small brass door with the word service. It opened to a shaft descant with the smells of the whole building. Cigars and perfume and chlorine and cold meat, boiler smoke and lilacs and wet stone. There's an old superstition that if you put your head into a building's shaft, air, light, elevator, you can hear its argument with itself. The Oleander argued in bells. High, low, tender, furious. I slid inside, my legs dangling until my shoes found a rope ladder, and climbed. A light glowed below. Above, darkness with a texture like flocked wallpaper. I climbed up toward the quiet, then down toward the glow, then sideways, because that is possible here. The shaft's mouth on 9 was painted shut, so was 8 on 7. My fingers found a latch, a square of black opened. Cool air kissed my face. I squirmed through and stood in a pantry with walls of glass that did not reflect. The shelves held tureens with lids sealed by time, silver trays etched with the ghosts of roasts. A sign leaned in a corner. We apologize for the inconvenience. The kind of sentence that means everything and nothing at once. The door out of the pantry opened onto a hallway lined with mirrors. Each mirror showed the corridor from a different year. Ruptured pipes, men in rubber boots carrying pumps, a parade of flaming hotel staff holding candles as the power failed, a bride running barefoot, flowers hanging like wet laundry from her hand, the night auditor younger, but the smile exactly the same. In the last mirror, I saw myself not moving, ringing the nightstand bell. Don't, I told the glass. It did not obey. Then I saw the number etched small in the corner of the mirror's frame. 313. The mirror was mine. A thought came like a bruise. We live forward. Everything else happens in rooms. I had to break the ring before it found me. The hotel had a causeway under it, a service tunnel for laundry and waste. There, I might find the pipes that went wrong. There, I could convince myself what haunted this place was physics. And physics hates only ignorance, not people. Part Roman 8, boiler room arithmetic. In the boiler room, the heat was a living thing. The boilers rib-caged and huffing, an iron heart with a stutter. I've always loved these spaces where the hotel's pretensions fall away, where you can see how every luxury is paid for in noise and heat and risk. On a workbench lay a stack of intake forms for employees. The top one had never been filled. Position, Night Auditor. Hours, 11 p.m., 7 a.m. primary duties: balance, 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 underlined 3 times. On the floor at my feet, a thin sheen of water. My shoe scuffed through it and released a smell like pennies and lilies. A bell rang here too, softer. A string tapped lightly by a knuckle. A single door led deeper. My hand hesitated on the knob. Every story about places like this says, don't go through. But all my stories would be worthless if I didn't go once. The door opened to a room with a chair bolted to the center of the floor, and a line of cracked plaster on the far wall where a chalkboard had hung. A single pull-chain bulb lit the dust into a mild storm. On the wall, large as a manifesto, a grid had been painted. In each square, a number. Some were dates, some were balances, some were tallies like the ones upstairs. I stood in the chair. The grid went floor to ceiling. In the corner, a legend: arrive, depart, paid, owed, rung, rung, I said aloud. Behind me, the door closed with a sound like a confession. The bulb trembled on its chain. You learn to breathe when you're trapped. In out slow. Let the brain do its work. The numbers organized. A pattern of 11s and 13s and 9s, peaking on Oct 13, 1972. The night of the gala. A pipe burst on floor 9 above the ballroom. A waterfall through ceiling medallions. Guests ran. Staff ran. Someone locked the fire doors to keep the flood from swallowing the electrics. In the panic, the bell at the front desk rang again. And a third, the rule of 3, told the building what it already knew. The party had ended, but the bill remained. There was always going to be a balance nobody could pay. As I traced the painted grid, my finger fell into a groove in the plaster where the chalk had bitten deep. The groove spelled a name I hadn't told anyone in years, my legal name before I changed it to make my byline sharper. My childhood that I had left in another state, like a suitcase I would never claim. A bell rang. High, delicate, in the bone of the building. The bulb winked, then steadied. My name shimmered in chalk. Below it, a room number, 313, part Roman 9. The stair that leads back to before. When I opened the door, the hallway beyond was old new. The wallpaper was the pattern I had seen beneath the underworld. My shoes made no sound. The air smelled of tobacco, salt, and something like the inside of a conch shell. The stairwell was full of people who moved like pages turning. None of them turned to look at me, but they all made room. On the landing between 2 and 3, a little boy sat with his legs through the banister, swinging his foot into the space where floor should be. He looked straight at me and wrinkled his nose. "Do you know me?" I asked before I could decide not to. He nodded solemnly. You keep coming back, he said, from where he thought, from the place where they ask what you owe. Who asks? He shrugged. Everyone who rang the bell. He lifted his hand. The bell between his fingers was the thinnest I had seen, more suggestion than metal, something made for a tabletop wedding. He swung it gently. The sound it made was not sound. It was a memory arriving too fast. I knew this boy. He was me when I was small enough to wear shoes with Velcro and ask my mother if we could please go somewhere that had a pool. We had come to a hotel like this one when I was 8 and my father left. At night, I had heard the bell at the front desk and thought it was a toy. I had never forgotten its exact pitch. I had only pretended to. You can go now, the boy said. His smile was kind, which in children is the cruelest kindness because it is honest. Where? I asked. He tilted his head upward. Up, he said. Rooms that high are for those who can't come down, I said. He grinned. Not if you're already leaving. He stood, slipping between the spindles, and was gone. The stairwell was just the stairwell again. The east window was a watercolor of rain, part Roman 9. The stair that leads back to before. When I opened the door, the hallway beyond was old new. The wallpaper was the pattern I had seen beneath the underworld. My shoes made no sound. The air smelled of tobacco, salt, and something like the inside of a conch shell. The stairwell was full of people who moved like pages turning. None of them turned to look at me, but they all made room. On the landing between 2 and 3, a little boy sat with his legs through the banister, swinging his foot into the space where floor should be. He looked straight at me and wrinkled his nose. "Do you know me?" I asked before I could decide not to. He nodded solemnly. "You keep coming back," he said, from where he thought, from the place where they ask what you owe. Who asks? He shrugged. Everyone who rang the bell. He lifted his hand. The bell between his fingers was the thinnest I had seen, more suggestion than metal, something made for a tabletop wedding. He swung it gently. The sound it made was not sound. It was a memory arriving too fast. I knew this boy. He was me when I was small enough to wear shoes with Velcro and ask my mother if we could please go somewhere that had a pool. We had come to a hotel like this one when I was 8 and my father left. At night, I had heard the bell at the front desk and thought it was a toy. I had never forgotten its exact pitch. I had only pretended to. "You can go now," the boy said. His smile was kind, which in children is the cruelest kindness because it is honest. "Where?" I asked. He tilted his head upward. "Up," he said. "Rooms that high are for those who can't come down," I said. He grinned. "Not if you're already leaving." He stood, slipping between the spindles, and was gone. The stairwell was just the stairwell again. The east window was a watercolor of rain, Part X. The Night Auditor balances the book. The front desk bell was blood bright in the lamplight. The lobby's revolving door ticked at the speed of an absent guest. The Night Auditor watched me arrive, as if we had been standing like this for years. Me, wet with Hotel Air hymn, dry as ledger paper. We are at the balancing portion of the evening, he said. Some nights are like this, others aren't. You wouldn't believe how many nights pass without a single bell. You put my name in the wall, I said. I recorded what the hotel told me, he said. He slid the ledger toward me and placed the pen exactly on the blank line where depart should be. Guests often wish to believe they wrote their own story before they find out it was co-authored. Who co-authored mine? He shook his head. We don't traffic in blame, only balance. Would you like a receipt? For what? For what you owe, he said, must settle accounts for you to leave. What if I don't pay? You will, he said lightly. Some bills charge interest. What is the currency? I asked tightly. In these stories, there's always some awful bargain, your firstborn, your true name, your favorite memory. His smile was very small. We don't take children, he said. We do keep names. We prefer sound. How do I pay in sound? You ring the bell, he said, and tapped it with his finger. The note rose in the room like a bird discovering the window was closed. No, I said. The word came back flatter than I meant it to. Then you stay to work it off, he said pleasantly. We have an open position, as I'm sure you saw. Hours are long but consistent. Benefits include more night than you thought possible. It was you, I said, on the phone, in the mirrors, upstairs with the flood. It was you calling my name. I am an instrument, he said, and for a moment the lobby's light caught his eyes and made them reflective as water. The hotel plays me, but I do confess a fondness for recurring narratives. They make the balance sheet tidy. What happens if I ring it? I asked, and the question tasted like surrender. You go where the bell points, he said, and if I refuse, you stay, he repeated, as if we were reciting vows. I thought of all the times I had run toward the places people ran away from. I thought of how every story I sold had a little stain that wasn't quite mine. I thought of the boy on the landing, and the woman on 9, and the orchestra that breathed without lungs. Do you remember the gala? I asked him. Intimately, he said. I arrived that night. The previous night, Auditor departed at last call. What did he owe? The smile sharpened, an ending. And you took the job to give it to him. To give it to you, he said gently. Lightning flashed, and in that glare, both of his hands were on the bell, and both were my hands. I ran. Part Roman 11, fire exit. You can't run in haunted buildings the way you run in sane ones. Doors move, walls inhale. The exit signs flicker toward you when you're far away and retreat when you are close. but I have been in enough that I know the one trick that usually works. Don't change floors. Pick a corridor and keep to it. Do not take the elevator mouth. Do not take the stair spine. Walk the arteries and wait for the heart to give out. I walked. I put my hand on the hallway's chair rail and slid it along the whole length, as if to keep my place in the text. The wallpaper's seams were not quite aligned. At the corner where the corridor turned, a housekeeping closet stood open. Inside, a cart of supplies, a pair of rubber boots, a bell the size of a thumbnail stitched to a maid's cap. I took the bell. It chimed like the softest truth. At the end of the hall, a glass door spilled onto the loading dock, the visible world beyond. Rain, my car, the highway's scar. The handle refused me once, twice. The third time it gave. I took one step onto the dock and heard a bell ring behind me, very close. Not the cap's bell, not the lobby's bell, the bell on my nightstand. I turned back into the hall. Room 313 door was open. The lamp was on. The bedspread had the hollow in it where a body had been. On the nightstand, the bell trembled. The phone was off the hook again, hissing C. I put the tiny maid's bell beside the nightstand bell. I waited. The front desk bell rang once, twice, 3 times. The ceiling water maps darkened, as if a storm had crawled up there to rest. In the mirror, I watched myself lift my hand. I felt, simultaneously, the heat of the boiler room and the cold of the pool, and the static brittle air of the ballroom, where the orchestra kept playing the part of the song where heartbreak thinks its triumph. I rang the bell on the nightstand. It made no sound. The ceiling maps answered. They rearranged as I watched, the dark seeping lines gathering, and not letters, not numbers, but a silhouette, a desk, a ledger, a bell, a man. The blur of his face sharpened until I recognized my own features, and behind them the Night Auditor's smile like a watermark. The phone clicked. "Wake-up call," he said. "It's time. Take the job," I said hoarsely into the deadline. "I won't. That's not how balance works," he said. "Take it anyway," I replied, and smashed the nightstand bell with a brass key. The bell dented, but did not break. The dent sang. Somewhere deep in the building, laughter like a child's clattered down a pipe. I hit the bell again. Metal cried. The little maid's bell rolled off the nightstand, chiming a delirious counterpoint. The mirror wavered, my face a painting in a flood. The phone went hot. "Enough," the Night Auditor said, and I felt the building shudder, a dog worrying off a leash. "Come get me," I said. "All right," he replied softly, and the lobby bell rang a 4th time, part Roman 12, the last balance. When he came to the doorway of 313. He left no footprints, though the carpet showed everything else. He took in the room the way a chef looks at a plate returned mostly eaten. He set the ledger on the desk. He set the pen by the ledger. He set the bell between us like a small altar. "I can't make you pay," he said. "I can only require the attempt, but you know the rate." "What is it?" I asked, steady. "Sound," he said again. "You pay with the sound you will never hear again." He lifted the bell and held it at my ear. "What will it cost?" I pressed. "Whatever word still keeps you from sleep," he said. I thought of all the words: father, sorry, stay, truth, my old name whose syllables still caught at the ribs. "Choose," he said gently. I reached up, took the bell, and put it down. "No," he smiled, tired now. "Then work," he said. "Just for a night. Each night is only a night." "Will it keep others from paying?" I asked. "For a while," he said. "Balance is patient." "Show me," I said. He opened the ledger. The paper smelled like damp lilies. The line beneath mine waited. He put the pen in my hand. I wrote depart, Oct 13. Paid, sound, owed, room 313. "Not your name," he chided. I looked at him until the humor left his face. "Then whose?" He considered. "Ours," he said finally. "That is the only honest answer." "Then write it," I said. "I'm busy." He laughed, a sound like cut glass in a velvet bag. "I knew you were the right choice." He reached for the bell. I knocked it from his hand. It fell and hit the floor and made no sound at all. We both stared at it. In the silence, the building held its breath. "You dented it," he said mildly, but there was something like concern in his voice. He bent to pick it up. I stepped on it with the heel of my shoe. Hard. It gave under my weight like a bone. He looked at me levelly. "Don't," he said. "Then help me leave," I said. He closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were not water but smoke. "You can leave in two directions," he said, "up or out. As your younger self advised, up is only for those who have already left. Out is for those who never really arrived. What are you?" "I keep coming back," I said, and heard the boy's echo in my voice. "Then you live here," he said gently. "You know the address of the room you run from." "What about you?" I asked. "Can you leave?" He cocked his head, as if hearing instructions from another part of the building. "I leave whenever someone takes the job," he said. I took it from a man who looked at me the way you're looking now. "Did he get out?" "He went where the bell points," he said. "Not everyone calls that out." "Where does it point?" I demanded. "To the moment you should have left and didn't," he said simply. Something gave beneath my shoe. The bell split along the dent, and a smell blew out, the scent of old rain in a hot room, of someone stepping from a bath at midnight, of deadlines, of chlorine, of an empty glass on a table after a friend goes home. and you realize you never said the thing you meant to say. "I'm going up," I said. He nodded, a little bow. "Then take the service stair. The elevator goes too quickly." "Will you stop me? Why would I?" He looked almost offended. "Balancing is not forbidding. It's keeping track." He handed me the ledger. "You'll need this," he said. "For what?" "To show them your side," he said. And for the first time I heard fear in his voice, thin as that child's bell. Part Roman 13, the 13th floor. There is no 13th floor in hotels, or so the brochures pleased themselves to claim. The Oleander numbered its like a dare. On the service stair, numbers climbed with me: 10, 11, 12. Between 12 and 13, the space lengthened into a jog, then a run, then a climb through something that had not decided yet if it was hallway or sky. The door at 13 was not a door, but a curtain, the kind a stage uses when its illusions are most audacious. I pushed through. The corridor beyond was made of moments. Each door opened to one I had lived and left, and sometimes told myself I had outgrown. On my right, a room where my mother slept with a fan on high to keep from hearing my father leave. On my left, a room where I lied elegantly to someone who deserved better and went on to prove it. Down the hall, room after room where the party had ended, and I had stayed to clean up like I owed it anything. At the end, a door with a brass 313, and beneath it, a small plaque that reads simply, "Up." I knocked. At once, a bell answered from inside. I entered. It was not my room. It was all my rooms. Every key I had turned. Every bed I had warmed and abandoned. Every desk where I had typed the story and ignored the cost. Every mirror in which I had met my own eyes and pretended not to know them. On the nightstand, yes, 2 bells, 1 whole, 1 split. Beside them, a note card, "Leave now." I did not touch the bells. I put the ledger on the desk and wrote in a hand that surprised me with its steadiness, "Depart now." Paid all I didn't say. Owed nothing. Room up. Then I added my old name, the one I avoided for a decade. And without looking away, I said it aloud. It felt like letting go of a railing I had thought was load-bearing, but was only decoration. The phone rang. I answered it without moving. "Wake-up call," the Night Auditor said, but his voice was smaller now, as if he stood at the end of a long hallway with a bell in his palm and no one to ring it for. "I'm checking out," I told him. "No," he said, less as a denial than as a lament. "You're checking in where you should have. I'm sorry. I told you we try to wake people. We're better at keeping them." "Come up," I said. "If you want to leave, come up." He did not answer. The line went to sea. I picked up the whole bell and the split bell set them side by side. When they touched, a thin tone rose like a breath through a reed. The air in the room leaned. The walls thickened and thinned like something breathing under a sheet. I stepped to the door marked up. I opened it. It was not stairs. It was not sky. It was the lobby, bright with morning that had not arrived yet. It was the revolving door moving at a human pace. It was the front desk without the ledger. No one stood behind it. The bell was gone. I looked down. The ledger was in my hands. "I'm not taking the job," I told the empty desk, but the desk did not believe me. I wrote a final line, "Auditor, vacant." Then I walked to the revolving door and into the rain. Coda, a receipt. The highway stitched past in a bright line, rain dimpling on my windshield. I drove until the radio found a station that played a song I had loved when I was 14 and believed every chorus was a promise. I drove until the scent of damp lilies receded and the smell of wet asphalt claimed me like a common inheritance. At a gas station 3 towns over, I took the ledger out under the awning and opened it. The lines were blank. Not blank as in erased, but blank as in unused. The columns waited for names, dates, amounts, a bell to ring. It looked nothing like the book I had seen in the lobby. It looked exact. A receipt fluttered loose. I see. Hot, dep, balance, carried forward, see no see. I thought of calling the number on the brochure if the brochure existed. I did not. Instead, I set the ledger on the passenger seat like a nervous companion and drove home to the apartment where the hall sometimes smells of my neighbor's cooking and the radiator knocks like an old friend at the window. I went to sleep with the ledger under my bed like a Bible left by the Gideons and woke at dawn to a city that looked real enough too. I tell myself now that I left the hotel. The bell hasn't rung C, but some nights the radiator makes a sound like breath caught in a throat. Some mornings, when I reach for the pen on my desk, it's already in my hand, and the page already has my name written on it twice. When I pass my hallway mirror, I see a man at a counter I don't own, smiling with careful, practiced teeth as someone I can't quite make out signs the book. The radio plays the song from when I was 14. I remember the chorus differently each time. The ledger blank rests under the bed, and sometimes something beneath it rustles like A. On the calendar last week, I circled a date without thinking. Last night, at exactly 11:59, the building power flickered. In the glass of my window, the city rearranged into a map of water stains. The phone rang once in the dark and stopped. And in the silence that followed, so thin it could have fit in a thimble, clean, high note that made my old name sit up inside me and look around for its shoes. I did not answer, but I do what he did. I keep a ledger now. I write down arrive. I write down depart. I list what I paid and what I owe and what I cannot balance, except by ringing something I refuse to touch. I inventory every lone thing I find in this life. A single glove on a bus bench, a key in a gutter, a child's shoe on a hotel cart in a building I will not drive back to. I don't know if it helps, but I know the price of not keeping track. And I know this: there are hotels for the living and hotels for the rest. The Hotel Oleander is both. It opens where roads fail and stories make poor bridges. It is hospitable. It is fair. It is patient. It's always been expecting you. If a bell rings where there are no guests, it's not because you aren't one. It's because you already checked in twice. And in places like that, checkout is not the opposite of